Hey YouTubers. Right, this time I'm going to look further into the so-called 200 proofs of E Dubay, and we'll take 60 to 92 and 94. And again we will see that there is a lack of evidence, that there is the use of poor and invalid reasoning, and that many statements are made that are known or intended by its source to be misleading, inaccurate or false. And he's so desperate to prove that the Earth is flat that he needs like 32 or 33 so-called proofs to show that we can see things, objects over larger distance than should be possible on a globe. So if we prove him wrong or prove that he's misleading us, then we have dealt with these proofs at once. And I will show you that he is misleading you and that he is lying and uses false evidence, and that he will sometimes say an object is 60 miles away, and when you then look into it, it's only 30, so he's committing fraud. Sometimes there is only this one-time occurrence that then is no proof at all, because on a flat earth, certain distances, if you can watch over that distance, it should be there every day, of course. Let's look into it. Now, is proof 60 is basically the statement that the horizon on the flat earth is perfectly flat, and then you can take some sort of device like a 6 to 12 foot long smooth level board, etc., and put it on a tripod, but you can also take a theodolite, of course. And what is the case here is that if you would be standing on a ball and it would be smooth and you are looking in one direction, you will see also a horizon. It's of course not that far away as it would be on a flat earth, but there is a horizon. That's where the curve is. And if you now turn 90 degrees, then you again will see, because you're on a ball, at the same distance, that horizon. And it doesn't matter if you then turn again and turn again, that horizon on a ball is always at the same distance. It's like a sort of circle around you, and because of that, it will always be like a straight line. So, like here, if you would be looking at one point at the horizon and you would turn this device, it would always stay along the same line. And actually, through Tacity has a nice video called My Flat Perspective, in which he has a moving simulation, which you could look at and see that that is basically the case. So this is not a debunking, it's just looking at a property of a ball, which is, it gives you the same impression as when you would be on a flat plane or a flat earth. So it's not proof. If you understand this, then here's proof 94, and I'm jumping now ahead to the end almost, but it's where he then states that from Highland near Portsmouth Harbour in the UK, he's looking to the Isle of Wight, and then he says the entire base of the island, where water and land come together, composes a perfectly straight line 22 miles long. And then they give you the impression that looking through a theodolite, as he says here, you should see this. Now, it's of course complete bullshit, because I just showed you that on a ball, the property of the ball is when you turn with your theodolite, you will always stay on the horizon which you have leveled to. And this will not happen. Secondly, if this was the entire Isle of Man, this would be fraud already as well, because the Isle of Man is only 3 miles away from a point near Portsmouth. And if it's only 3.5 miles away, you don't even get to the curve. So it's logical, you can see the sea and the island there. If you then would look to the left and to the right, you would be looking at the maximum of 6.5 miles. Now that point here is not really high up, it's something like 3 meters. I looked that up. So you would be 5 meters high, and that would mean that 30 centimeters here, or 1 feet, and in this direction the same, might drop. And it's not that it then looks curved, but the island would be a little bit behind the curve there, while the sea would still seem to be completely flat. And if you then are at that point, then the whole width is only 11 miles, because the island is 22 miles here, but most is simply covered by the fact that if you are standing somewhere near Portsmouth, you can't even see the full width of the island. You would have to be somewhere here. Yeah? So, I think this is pretty much debunked. On the globe you would see the whole island, because the distance is simply so short that it doesn't even come close to talk about large distances where you can see something. In 61, he then says that certain points should tilt backwards from your perspective. Distant buildings along the horizon would all look like leaning towers of Pisa, falling away from the observer. I still think this is the dumbest argument ever. But let's have a look at it. The circumference of the Earth is 25,000 miles, and that represents 360 degrees, which means that for every 10 miles a object is away from you, it will lean back 0.14 degrees. Now, the Tower of Pisa is tilting 3.8 degrees, which means if the way it tilts is the same as if it was 263 miles away. So for a building to lean back as the Tower of Pisa does, the way he says in his proof, it should be 263 miles away. What would you see then? Well, the Tower of Pisa would be so small and so far away, it would not be more than this little dot here on the screen. Now imagine we are able to zoom into it as if we were 26 miles away. We probably would see something like this. And if we zoom in more, so that it is approximately 2.6 miles away, we probably would be seeing something like this. And it looks pretty straight, because it is leaning backwards and not sideways. So if we come very close, this is what we would see. While that is what it looks from the side. So yes, if something is leaning backward at 263 miles far away, it would appear to lean back. But if you look at it from your side, it's tilting away. You hardly see it. So before something becomes visible tilting away, it needs to be over 200 miles away. But then it is so small, you can't see it anymore. So it's a non-argument. This is really, yeah, I still believe the dumbest argument ever used. Now, then we have the so-called Old Bedford level canal experiments done by Samuel Rowbotham. Now, I have a problem with this guy. Because we're talking about some dude in 1860, it's 1.5 centuries ago, who is clearly a pedophile because he knocked up his 16-year-old daughter of his laundress, producing 14 children, imagine, and then only 4 survive. He was also a known socialist, So that's for all the hardline Republicans who are flat earthers. If a socialist is your source, then good luck with it. But he also started to use the name Dr. Samuel Burley. Now I hate people also that claim to be a doctor when they are not. Some might know him under his other name, Parallax. And actually Dubai starts to call him Dr. Robotham. And you know, this is again fraud, because the guy is already not a doctor, and then you start to take over that as if it was some sort of scientist. Sorry. If you now go and look at the Walney website, that is the area where this canal is, and it's actually not a canal. If you go and read all the information that is there, it is simply a river which is pretty straight. And one of the experiments of Robotham was that the boat would disappear and then appear again, and it was sort of dip. But if you now read that document there, it apparently wasn't a dip but a kink in the otherwise straight waterway. So it's not even completely straight. And you can actually look up the place where that kink was and how it caused the boat to disappear and later appear again. So I do have a problem with guys that take on titles and are not entitled to, and are a pedophile and are a socialist, and altogether, sorry. This guy was debunked so often already that I don't need to do it. That there have even been court cases on this one. So it is one of the worst proofs and experiments ever done. Also probably from this guy is 67, where they say, well, you have the distance between Isle of Man, the Douglas Harbour there, and the Great Orme's Head in North Wales, 60 miles, and on a clear day of a modest altitude of 100 feet, you can see Great Orme's Head. Now, Great Orme's Head is south of Douglas Harbour, and there is no way you can see from Douglas Harbour Orme's Head, simply because this ridge is in between. Yeah? So if you now go on that ridge, then you are approximately 100-120 meters high, and you look at the Isle of Man, at the Great Orme's Head, which is a part of the UK there. It is also very high. It's even 160 to 200 meters high. And if you take those two heights, you can cover on a curved earth over 80 miles. So this whole picture is again putting you off from what is the real truth. First of all, this drawing is completely wrong. It is completely exaggerated, but the hills are so high that you would even be able to cover 80 miles and still from one point see the other. So I don't think this is a real good proof. But he simply continues, and then he takes the Philadelphia skyline is clearly visible from Apple Pie Hill in the New Jersey Pine Barrens, 40 miles away, and the hill is 205 foot high. Well, I looked it up. There is Apple Pie Hill forestry. It's forest, and in the picture you don't see much forest. Apparently you are looking over the forest. But it's also not 40 miles away, it's only 32 miles away. So he just adds 25% to the distance. And if you're in a forest, you can't have such a nice view, so you probably have climbed up in this tower. And that is a 197 feet tower on a 205 feet hill. And yes, there is no problem on a curved earth to see the buildings, the high-rise buildings of Philly from there. This is fraud. changing data that is not correct. New York skyline clearly visible from Harriman's State Park, Bear Mountain, 60 miles away. Well, it is 1,200 foot high. Well, let's have a look. Harriman State Park, New York, is only 38 miles. So it's not 60, it's 38 miles. And if you are on a 1,200 feet high mountain, you can see on the globe up to 45 miles. So there is no problem at all on the globe to see New York. So, fraud. Washington's Rock in New Jersey is getting better and better. I don't even care about the elevation anymore, because if we look at Washington's Rock toward New York, we see it's 25 miles. If we take another one and from Washington's Rock to Philadelphia, it's 56 miles. So if we add up 25 miles and 57 miles, the total distance between those is approximately 82 miles and not 120 miles. He just added 50% to the distance. Very often discussed is the Chicago skyline across Lake Michigan. He says it is often possible to see the Chicago skyline, and after this guy photographed the phenomena of a superior image, it was all over the news. Hell, if it is often possible, then why should this come into the news? It only came into the news because it was a very exceptional thing that happened. That is the reason why there was so much fuss about. And then you say, while these atmospheric anomalies can be caused, certainly occur, he says the skyline in question was facing right up, and unlike hazy illusory mirages, a mirage is something different, Mr. Dubay, than a superior mirage. And mirages are not fata morganas, which are hazy, etc. A superior mirage can be as clear as the normal object, and it can also appear straight up. There is no strange thing. So this is not debunked, but I really put a challenge here to the whole FE community. If it is often possible, how come this is the only picture that exists? There should be hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of pictures of that skyline, and that is not the case. Now I'm going to skip 72 for a second, because a similar thing happened in Italy once, and only the photographer there made a few more photos at the same moment it happened. But again, we will see a lot of fraud here. So it can happen that these are visible, and actually they could even be visible at clear weather, simply because of the following reason. From Genova, he says, 70 feet above sea level, 70 feet above sea level, 70 feet, 70 feet. Oh, no, here he doesn't say it, but it is the same thing. And he makes a couple of mistakes. First of all, he swaps Elba and Gorgona, which you can see here. If you go from the left to the right, from the way you look, you first get Gorgona, and then you get Elba, and then Capri, and then Corsica. And I must say, all these islands all stick out 500 to 1,000 meters at least above sea level. But it's not fucking taken from 70 feet above sea level. I've been in Genova, and this is the harbor, or one of the harbors, and just look at this crane. This crane is higher than 70 feet, which equals 21 meters. Yeah, it is probably 40, maybe even 50 meters high. And what do we see here? We see cranes in the harbor, down there. So I must be rather 500 feet high, or actually 500 meters high probably, on the hills here around Genova. This is not taken from 70 foot. Yeah? It is, and the moment you go up that high, suddenly the whole story about how much you could see under normal conditions already changes. Yeah? So, lies, lies, lies. Again, probably taken over from Mr. Parallax, or our pedophile socialist. He takes over the following. The newspaper reported the Queen's visit to Great Grimsby from Hull, recording they were able to see a 300-foot tall dock tower from 70 miles away. Well, there is Hull, there is Grimsby. It is 24 kilometers, or only 15 miles, not 17 miles. And over a distance of 15 miles you can see that tower. No problem on a globe. So, how many more do you need? Okay, I have more. Come on, let's... Anchorage, Alaska, at an elevation of 102 feet. On clear days, Mount Foraker can be seen with the naked eye 120 miles away. 102 feet elevation? Liar. How come you look over 240, 300 feet high buildings if you're just 102 feet high above sea level? Yeah? Then I started to look where would you have to be to have this image, and I found this one. And this one is taken from Flat Top Mountain. And Flat Top Mountain happens to be 3,000 feet high. Now maybe this picture here was taken from 102 feet, although I don't trust him anymore with any of his figures. But he says, in reality, however, the entire mountain can be seen. No, I only see tops, and by far not the same picture as you see here. So, you are putting words here that are a lie in itself, and then you say it should lean back. Well, it's only 120 miles, or 130 miles you say here, and 130 miles give you a tilt that is 1.8 degrees. Now, you cannot see there if that mountain is tilting away from you 1.8 degrees. You couldn't even see if it was 5 degrees. Because you have no idea, like in a straight building, you could imagine it, what it would look like when it tilts back, but due to the shape of a mountain you can't say anything about things tilting away. They don't tilt away. Yeah, they do tilt away, but it is not something that you would be able to see as, hey, look, it is tilting. And simply because of this data and actually being probably at least 10 times higher, let's say 1,000 feet high, you know, it's a fucking fraud. And then he comes with the lighthouses, and again he makes the mistake of taking parallax data. So Mr. Rowbottom again. And I think for somebody who calls himself leading the International Flat Earth Research Society, he is very unscientific, you know. He hasn't verified any of the data he is presenting to you. So he ends up with proof 81, mentioning the Dunkerque lighthouse on the south coast of France. Come on, asshole, this is the Dunkerque lighthouse, and there is Dunkerque. Anybody who knows the history of the Second World War knows that Dunkerque, the place was where the English boarded back to flee from the German army that was rushing into Europe. And it's there, north of France, not in the south of France. But he says it here. Dunkerque lighthouse in the south of France. But what I did here was the following. I made a sort of table where I take here the presented distances according to Mr. Dubay. The lighthouses are visible, and here I have presented the heights given by him. And now I take, for instance, this one, 91, I put it here, the Port Said, Egypt lighthouse at an elevation of 60 feet, as seen as 58 miles away. Huh? 58 miles is almost 60, so I put it there. And then the Statue of Liberty, 326 feet high, so 320, also 60 miles away visible. And actually, that is what I would expect. If you take all the lighthouses, they should be visible all over the flat Earth, because it is flat. But, okay, perspective, weather conditions, hell, let's say 60, then at least every freaking lighthouse higher than the one in Port Said, accordingly to his data, should all be basically visible in one line. I already see one here that is 82, Port Nicholson, New Zealand, 420 feet high and visible from only 35 miles. That's a bit strange. If this one, 60 feet high, can be seen 58 miles away. So you would expect them all to be there. Let's have a look. If we fill in all the data given here, we get this randomly scattered picture, which makes no sense. They all should be around here. Now, I've started to look up as many of them as I could find, and I filled in the data in the table. And what we see is we see some of them all move toward where you would expect them. That is this curve, because there is this root or in the formula. That means that the higher they get, it's not a linear line, it does this. Now we have a few left, those two I could not find, so he's mentioning two lighthouses. I cannot find any real data of. The Statue of Liberty is not a real lighthouse, but all I have is that one single report in his document, and that comes from Mr. Parallax, we already know is a fraud, so it's absolutely not trustworthy. And this one is the tower of the church in Antwerp that apparently was seen from 150 miles. Now I live 70 miles away from Antwerp, and I promise you, even if I go here on high buildings, and my office was on the top building in the city nearby, and I tell you, you can't see that tower, not with binos, not with a telescope, because it's simply not visible. So this is a complete hoax. And as I said before, if the Earth was flat, they all should be there. This is already proof the Earth is not flat. And this shows, if you take the real data, it is fitting with what you would expect on the curve. So, 33 so-called proofs that are not proofs. And he lies in 28 of them. Yeah? Or, as is the case with the lighthouses, he didn't even bother to research. So he takes the lies from somebody else. But why? Why do you say something is 60 miles away when it is 32? Why claim you are at 102 feet? Well, it could be anything between 1,000 and 3,000 feet. That is a lying. That's not scientific. And therefore you basically take away any of the value of the proof you might have, but you don't, because, yeah, hell, the Earth is round. Yeah? And if you then think you have something like a lighthouse of 60 feet high, visible at 60 miles, then you should be consistent with your claim, and you should be able to show that on a flat Earth they're all visible that far. So here's the challenge. Come up with decent pictures. Stop making in 2014 a book, and the best data you have comes from 1860 from this guy, Parallax. Come on. Everybody has a camera. Everybody should be able to make pictures of Chicago skylines over Lake Michigan. And they don't. Why do they don't? Because it is impossible. The only thing, and thank you for watching everybody, it is a long one, I know, but please keep an open mind. Stay critical. Check the data people present to you, also you Mr. Dubai, because you've been had by simply wanting to believe too much. See the lies, detect the fallacies, and don't be afraid of the globe, because you live on it.